Like you see our 100th Regiment of Foot lands over there by the gate, keeping an eye out, seeing what they can see. But at the time, you know, without all the light pollution that we have today, the nights got very dark, and a clever enemy would use that darkness to their advantage, particularly when you're assaulting a fortification like this. So the sentries have to be very alert to such a situation. A simple little crackle in the distance, it could be anything. And usually the quickest way to sound the alarm was to shoot at whatever was coming at you. And so we'll have to see if our sentries are keeping a close enough eye. One of the reasons that the sentries were not allowed to smoke or drink while they were on duty was precisely that.
Hello. Are you giving kisses? Mwah. What is that? I don't know what that is. That's weird. You're eating my chin. No. Oh. Yeah.
Right there. Black barrel. Okay. Here.
Cannon. Yeah, he was there. I'm over there now. It's loud. It's not super loud.
Why? I just fixed the blind. I also did. This thing.
She gets freaked out by loud noises. Okay, see that cannon?
So it seems as though someone has spotted something, and with his high-pitched, definitely spotted something, with the high-pitched whistle, one of the sentries is running in to rouse up the troops, get them out of bed, get going quick. So we can see some of the Americans have gotten over some of the palisades to the bastion. They're pushing in against the sentries. And the British are returning fire in force. But those poor sentries, they are going to be quickly overrun by the looks of it. The Americans are pushing very hard against them. And those poor boys, the 100th, if there's anybody with some Irish in them, the 100th was a good Irish regiment while they lasted. And with the Americans now seizing the gate, they can probably pry that open and get some more troops up and over the wall, while the British troops are still rousing. Now it takes time to get these troops up and ready, and this can be used to your advantage. For example, in December of 1813, the British launched a surprise attack against Fort Niagara. They actually got the password, so they didn't even have to storm the walls. They just opened the door. And they went storming in, and the Americans were barely able to get up in time to try to defend themselves. It was a complete victory for the British. They took the place easily. In fact, the American commander was so confident that the fort hadn't fallen that the next day he went riding into the fort and was promptly captured. So we can see one of the British units that was part of the guard detail is coming out here to try to offer some sort of resistance, slow down the enemy. But you can count how many are out there, and you can see how many are coming out for the Americans, and they better get some help very quickly. So we can see some of the British forces are streaming out. You can see they've tried to put the kit together in some fashion, but they had to get out there in a hurry. So I apologize for any proper ladies in the crowd. Some of these gentlemen may not be terribly dignified. And the Royal Artillery's skedaddling as quick as they can out of the bastion over there, out of Brock's bastion. The cannons are very valuable. They got to get those out of there as quick as they can. And as you can see, they're using the oldest form of horsepower, and that is men.
Look at that on me. Look at that on me.
So you can see smoke starting to choke the battlefield. This is one of the reasons why you want that bright, distinctive uniform. If you look at the American line, you can barely identify some of their uniforms out there. And if you don't want to get shot by your side, you better have something someone's going to see pretty quick. Bright red, bright blue, does a good trick. Now the troops are firing away with their volleys, and volleys, of course, are the best way to use these muskets. They misfire all the time. They're only accurate to about 60 yards. So if you want to kill someone further away than 60 yards, get in a line. Everybody shoot at the same time. Somebody with a working weapon is going to hit something, even at 200 yards away. So the Americans are trying to slowly push their forces forward. The British have come out in force to resist them, but caught in their bedclothes, they may be at a disadvantage. Now for the eagle-eyed amongst you, look in the center of the British line. You'll see a bunch of guys with fans on the top of their head. That's the command group there. You notice a fellow in a white coat. He's taking flight right now. It wasn't uncommon for officers to have servants or batmen with them when they were in garrison. And these servants would often be enlisted men or even just hired help that would assist them in everything from writing letters out, reading things, and most importantly, helping the officer dress his finest. Having just run out onto the battlefield, these officers are in dire need of getting their proper wear out on the field. Ooh, and a crushing volley from the Americans. Now, even with this cacophony of gunpowder going off, you can still hear that fife screeching through the air. The high-pitched tones of the fife made it very easy to be heard over the din of battle. That's why it was used as communications. Now, closest to you folks on the British line, you'll see a little motley crew there. That little motley crew is a mixture of the British Indian Department and the 19th Light Dragoons. And you'll say, well, if it's the British Indian Department, where are the natives? And if they're cavalry, where the heck are their horses? Well, the answer to both is the same. Outside. You wouldn't usually have stables inside the fort. It could be a little bit crowded in here. And most of the First Nations, they kind of distrusted walled forts and coming inside. Many of them viewed it as a place of disease. As the Americans are pushing forward, you'll notice their officers go out in front of them, sword drawn. Being an officer was a dangerous job in both armies. You were expected to lead from the front. As a result, most records of the time show officers had a higher casualty rate than the men they led out onto the battlefield. So really, it don't matter how fancy you look, you're going to go down just the same. Oh, if you look towards the officers' quarters, you can see some of those batmen and servants are making off with boxes. Officers brought with them a lot of accoutrements, including some pretty expensive stuff, so they're probably making sure that all of the important things in the fort, like the silverware, are protected. So it seems like the Americans are pushing the British off of the main parade square, but they best be mighty careful because there's still 3 British guns out here, and if they're getting this close, they might be loaded with something called canister. Canister was like turning your gun into a great big shotgun, and at this sort of range, you see that nice big clump of blue there? It would be gone. We're getting some good volleys out of the Americans here. They're pushing the British further and further back. They better hope the back door is unlocked. And advancing ahead of the American line. Any good loyal Canadians in the crowd? Yeah. You'll be pleased to know the troops that just launched ahead of the American forces, loyal Canadians fighting for the Americans. The Canadian Volunteers, 153 Canadians who decided to throw in their lot with the Americans. But good news, we caught some of them, and we hung, drawn, quartered them. So you can see the cannons taking some heavy toll on that block of blue I mentioned earlier. Now thankfully we don't have the gore setting turned on today, because if canister struck those folks, they would have been turned into a pink mist. Accounts of the time said that men struck by canister were indistinguishable from butchered horse flesh. So the Americans are getting the hint, cannon fire back, and are pulling back a little bit in hopes that the cannon fire will maybe not be as deadly. And the Canadians and British are pushing hard against the Canadian and Kentuckian wing there. The militia and the volunteers being forced to fall back pell-mell in the face of the enemy. I think the fifes and drums are being a little bit optimistic. They're playing The Girl I Left Behind Me. It's the tune you play when someone is leaving the fort. Look at that. Didn't even get a 7-10 split off of them. So with that wing just absolutely decimated, the British are now pushing hard against the remaining Americans. Yeah, feel free to cheer them on. They're the good guys on this side of the border. And the American force by now appears to be more than halved in its strength, while the British are coming on with more and more who are slowly waking up. And I can see some Americans slowly streaming out of the gate. So it seems like the British push is doing its job. There we go, a good full volley from the British, and you can really see that smoke that obscures the battlefield there. Now you hear a particularly gruff voice coming from the British lines. The officer who's fiddling with his sash there, that is the new commander, Craig Williams. I want everybody to give a little cheer for Craig. Craig recently became the official commander of the Crown Forces today, so this is his big debut. So feel free to give him a cheer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, like I mentioned, this is more of an example of what they would have called at the time a sham battle. They would have done these to encourage recruitment to the regiments, little battles to just show what it can be out there, the splendor of the uniform. And though it's not reenacting anything in particular, you saw an excellent example of the firepower of the two armies, an example of maneuvering, and in the case of the British, getting caught with your pants down.
I think he means with his head. That would be not allowed to say that.
40 or 40 or that one still comes up
So as the battle comes to a conclusion, as Ross, our drum major out there, reminded us earlier, laments were played to remember those who had fallen, and despite the fact that this was a sham battle, we had a bit of entertainment here, we still learned something, and we are still representing a site where men fought and died. So there is going to be a performance of the lament in honor of those who fought and died. We ask that during the lament you please remain silent, and if you could, please remove your caps during the lament in honor of those who fought, served, and potentially died here over 200 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause and a good cheer for all the reenactors who came out here today.